Now, I don't usually crack jokes about marriage to women I've known for exactly 15 minutes, especially not when I'm covered in sawdust and holding a power drill that sounds like an angry motorcycle. But that Tuesday afternoon was different. That Tuesday afternoon, I met Elena. My name's Marcus. I'm 28, and I fix things for a living. It's not hearts or relationships or broken dreams. Actual things. Leaky faucets, squeaky hinges, that weird electrical outlet in your kitchen that sparks. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. When you plug in the toaster, I run a handyman service called Fix It Right, which sounds way more professional than it actually is, considering my office is the backseat of my Toyota Camry and my business partner is my golden retriever, Benny, who mostly just judges my tool organization skills. The thing about being a handyman in Portland, Oregon, is that everyone here thinks they're handy too. This is a city where people buy $3,000 reclaimed barn doors and then spend 3 weekends trying to hang them crooked. Half my customers are tech workers who watched one YouTube video about home improvement and now own more power tools than Home Depot. The other half are retired folks who've been meaning to fix that cabinet door since the Clinton administration. I started this business 2 years ago after getting laid off from my job at a construction company. Turns out, when you tell your boss that his blueprint makes about as much sense as assembling IKEA furniture in the dark, they don't appreciate your honesty. Who knew? So there I was, 26 years old, unemployed, living in a studio apartment that was generous enough to call itself a cozy urban retreat, when really it was just expensive and small. Benny was actually my roommate's dog before my roommate decided to move to Denver to find himself, which apparently meant leaving behind his lease, his furniture, and his extremely food-motivated golden retriever. I kept Benny because, honestly, he was better company than most people I knew. He doesn't interrupt my stories, never steals my leftovers, and has never once suggested I should probably get on a dating app, man. The handyman thing started by accident. My upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Chen, heard me fixing my own broken garbage disposal at 2 a.m., don't ask, and knocked on my door the next morning, asking if I could look at her bathroom fan. One thing led to another, and suddenly, I had a business. Word of mouth in Portland travels faster than food truck lines, and before I knew it, I was booked solid. Most days, I love what I do. There's something satisfying about walking into someone's house where nothing works properly and leaving with everything humming along perfectly. Plus, you meet interesting people. There's the artist who pays me in homemade jam, the elderly couple who insist I stay for lunch every time, and the guy who's built an entire smart home system but can't figure out how to change a light bulb. Here's the thing about being a single guy who works alone. You spend a lot of time in your own head, driving between jobs. I listen to podcasts about everything from true crime to philosophy to people arguing about whether hot dogs are sandwiches. It's educational, sure, but it also means I've developed some strong opinions about things that probably don't matter and a tendency to make conversation with anyone who'll listen. Benny usually rides shotgun, his golden head hanging out the passenger window like he's the co-pilot of our operation. People love seeing him. Half my 5-star reviews mention the friendly dog more than my actual work. I've learned to embrace it. Benny's basically my marketing department, customer service representative, an emotional support animal, all rolled into one furry package. The Tuesday I met Elena started like any other. I had 3 jobs lined up. Fix a garbage disposal in the morning, install some shelving after lunch, and replace a bathroom exhaust fan in the late afternoon. Standard stuff. Nothing that should have prepared me for what was about to happen. I'd been driving through the Hawthorne district when I got the call. A woman with a slightly raspy voice, the kind that suggested either too much coffee or too many late nights, explained that her kitchen cabinet doors were hanging at angles that defied both gravity and common sense. She needed someone who could come by that afternoon and make them functional again. How bad are we talking? I asked, pulling over to jot down her address. Let's just say opening my spice cabinet is like playing Russian roulette with paprika, she replied. And yesterday, the door above my sink fell off completely and nearly took out my coffee maker. I liked her immediately. Anyone who could find humor in home repair disasters was my kind of customer. The address led me to a craftsman-style house in a neighborhood where every lawn looked like it belonged in a magazine, and every driveway had at least one Subaru. Not unusual for Portland, where environmental consciousness and caffeine addiction go hand in hand. The house itself was painted a soft blue-gray with white trim, surrounded by a garden that somehow managed to look both carefully planned and naturally wild. As I parked, Benny's ears perked up and his tail started its usual customer greeting. Routine. I gathered my toolbox, a leather case my dad gave me, that's older than I am and still more reliable than half the tools inside it, and checked my appearance in the side mirror. Not that it mattered much. Most people hiring handymen don't expect you to look like you stepped out of a magazine. They just want you to fix their stuff and not track mud through their house, walking up the front steps. I noticed the little details that suggested someone who paid attention. The mailbox was painted to match the house trim, the doormat said. Come back with a warrant and elegant script, and there were wind chimes that actually sounded musical instead of like someone throwing silverware. Downstairs, I rang the doorbell and heard footsteps approaching. Then the door opened, and I met Elena. And suddenly, a carefully planned afternoon became something entirely different. Elena opened the door like she was revealing a masterpiece. Honestly, that's exactly what it felt like. She had dark hair, with silver threads catching the afternoon light, pulled back casually but somehow elegant. Her eyes were deep brown like expensive coffee, laugh lines that suggested someone who'd lived fully and enjoyed most of it. She wore a paint-splattered denim shirt over black leggings, barefoot with dark purple toenails that probably had some fancy name like Midnight Rebellion. A smudge of yellow paint decorated her left cheek, and she held a coffee mug declaring, "I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right. You must be Marcus," she said, that raspy phone voice matching perfectly. "I'm Elena. Fair warning. My kitchen looks like it was attacked by someone with a personal vendetta against cabinet doors." I grinned. "I've seen worse. Last week a guy tried installing a ceiling fan with duct tape and optimism." She laughed, rich, genuine, completely unguarded. "Well, I only used duct tape on one door, so I'm ahead of the game." Benny padded forward, tail wagging like he was auditioning for a dog food commercial. Lena immediately crouched to his level, letting him try to lick her face while attempting to sit on her feet. "And who's this handsome guy?" "It's Benny. He's my quality control specialist, an unofficial greeter. He also has zero understanding of personal space." "I like him already," she said, scratching his ears. "Any dog that appreciates proper greetings is fine by me." She led us inside. The house smelled like coffee and actual flowers, not overwhelming perfume. Her living room mixed comfort and creativity, a worn leather couch with colorful pillows, bookshelves with actual books and original paintings instead of mass-produced art. "You're an artist," I observed, noticing an easel by the window with a half-finished landscape. Guilty. Though some days I'm just someone who owns art supplies and has questionable color judgment. She stepped over a canvas covered in blue and green paint drops. The kitchen was charming chaos. Cabinet doors hung at impossible angles, one completely detached and leaning against the counter, another held up by wishful thinking. Despite the disaster, everything else was spotless. "What happened here? Cabinet door rebellion?" Lena leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I wish I had that interesting a story. "I was organizing spices last weekend, and apparently these hinges were held together by hope and stubbornness. I opened one door and watched dominoes fall, except louder and with more swearing. I examined the damage, definitely fixable. Needs wood filler and new hinges, but nothing dramatic. Thank God. I was worried I'd live on takeout forever because accessing plates had become dangerous. As I unpacked tools, Lena made coffee without asking, the kind of automatic hospitality that suggested someone comfortable with people in her space. The aroma was incredible, and I already suspected this simple cabinet repair was about to become much more complicated in the best possible way. We fell into easy rhythm while I worked. Elena sat at her kitchen table sketching, occasionally glancing up to watch me wrestle with stubborn hinges. Benny claimed a sunny spot on the floor, doing his impression of a very handsome, very lazy rug. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, Subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What's the weirdest job you've had? Elena asked, shading what looked like her coffee mug. I paused, drilling. Last month, guy installed a hot tub in his living room. Not near it, literally where his couch used to be. That's brilliant in a completely insane way, right? Except he forgot about ventilation, waterproofing, and the fact that floor joists weren't designed for 1,000 gallons of water. Took 3 days helping him remove it before it crashed. Into his basement, Elena laughed. Did he save the hot tub? No, it's in his backyard, where it belongs. He throws intimate aquatic gatherings for 3 people max. I moved to the next cabinet. What about you? Weirdest art project? She gestured toward stacked canvases. 6 months painting pet portraits as historical figures. Napoleon the Pomeranian, Cleopatra the Tabby, George Washington the Golden Retriever. Please tell me you have examples. She pulled out a canvas showing a serious bulldog in Renaissance armor. Meet Sir Winston, defender of couch cushions. The painting was incredible, technically perfect, but completely ridiculous. This is amazing. How'd you think of this? Client wanted her cat painted regal and dignified. I figured why not go all the way? Turns out there's a robust market. 4 historical pet portraits. 3-month waiting lists. You've cornered a very specific, ridiculous market. Exactly. Best part is, every client is thrilled. Something satisfying about giving people exactly what they didn't know they wanted. As I worked, Elena made sandwiches without asking, turkey and avocado on homemade bread. She moved around her kitchen with unconscious precision, someone who actually cooked. This bread is incredible, I said. Thanks, I bake when thinking. Through painting problems, kneading dough helps work out composition issues, so you paint, teach, and bake. What else are you secretly amazing at? She considered seriously. I can change a tire in under 10 minutes. Speak conversational Italian from a semester abroad that should have been a full year. Make a mean margarita and fold fitted sheets properly. The fitted sheet thing is genuinely impressive. I just roll mine into a ball and hope. Most people do. It's one of those skills they should teach in school but don't, like salary negotiation or perfect avocado timing. Talking to Elena was like following an interesting forest path. You never knew what you'd find around the next turn, but you were sure it would be worth the walk. She had opinions about everything from coffee preparation to optimal painting. Lighten asked questions that suggested she'd actually listen to answers. What about you? She asked, refilling my coffee.
Secret talent?
I can fix pretty much anything with enough time and tools. But more importantly, I usually figure out what's actually broken versus what people think is broken. That sounds like a metaphor. Maybe half my calls are misdiagnosed problems. They'll say garbage disposal's broken when they need to reset a circuit breaker, or insist they need a new faucet when they need a 50-cent washer. Lena nodded. Thoughtfully. People want dramatic solutions instead of simple ones. Exactly. Sometimes the fix is easier than you think, but people convince themselves it must be complicated. And sometimes, she said, meeting my eyes, the problem isn't actually a problem, it's just different from expectations. There was something in how she said it that suggested we weren't just talking about plumbing anymore. By afternoon, I'd fixed the cabinets, and we'd moved to her back porch with wine. Elena had pulled a bottle from a previously inaccessible cabinet. Looking pleased that her spice organization project had finally paid off. This is nice, I said, settling into a mismatched chair that somehow worked perfectly. That's brilliant in a completely insane way, right? Except he forgot about ventilation, waterproofing, and the fact that floor joists weren't designed for 1,000 gallons of water. Took 3 days helping him remove it before it crashed. Into his basement, Elena laughed. Did he save the hot tub? No, it's in his backyard, where it belongs. He throws intimate aquatic gatherings for 3 people max. I moved to the next cabinet. What about you? Weirdest art project? She gestured toward stacked canvases. 6 months painting pet portraits as historical figures. Napoleon the Pomeranian, Cleopatra the Tabby, George Washington the Golden Retriever. Please tell me you have examples. She pulled out a canvas showing a serious bulldog in Renaissance armor. Meet Sir Winston, defender of couch cushions. The painting was incredible, technically perfect, but completely ridiculous. This is amazing. How'd you think of this? Client wanted her cat painted regal and dignified. I figured why not go all the way? Turns out there's a robust market. 4 historical pet portraits. 3-month waiting lists. You've cornered a very specific, ridiculous market. Exactly. Best part is, every client is thrilled. Something satisfying about giving people exactly what they didn't know they wanted. As I worked, Elena made sandwiches without asking, turkey and avocado on homemade bread. She moved around her kitchen with unconscious precision. The words escaped before I could stop them. For a moment, we stared at each other. I felt my face heating, started to backtrack. I mean, not literally propose. That would be insane. But Elena was smiling, a real smile reaching her eyes. 52, she said softly. Is that a problem? The way she asked wasn't defensive or apologetic. It was direct, honest, genuinely curious about my answer. Realized this wasn't small talk about age. This was her asking if 24 years between us was a deal breaker. I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. No, I said, it's not a problem. You sure? Elena. In 4 hours, you've made me laugh more than I have in months. You make incredible coffee, paint historical dog portraits for a living, and somehow made cabinet repair the most interesting part of my week. Your age isn't what I'm thinking about. What are you thinking about? Whether you'd let me take you to dinner sometime, somewhere with actual tables that doesn't require power tools. She was quiet, swirling wine in her glass. You know, this could get complicated. How so? People talk. A 20-IT-year-old guy and 52-year-old woman. They'll have opinions. Let them. You say that now? I mean it now. She studied my face like reading small print. You really don't care about the age thing? Elena, I've spent years dating women my age who think maturity is optional and emotional availability is foreign. You're the first person I've met who actually knows who she is. That's what happens when you live long enough to figure it out. Exactly. That doesn't seem like a problem to me. That seems like the whole point. That dinner happened 3 days later, and it was everything I'd hoped it would be and nothing like I'd expected. Elena chose a small Italian place in the Alberta district that felt more like someone's living room than a restaurant. Mismatched chairs, candles and wine bottles, and a chef who came out to personally recommend the special like he was inviting. You too, his family dinner? This place doesn't look like much, she said as we settled into a corner table. But they make pasta that'll ruin you for every other Italian restaurant in the city. She was right. The food was incredible, but more than that, Elena was completely in her element. She ordered in Italian, made the server laugh with some joke I didn't understand, and somehow managed to make me feel like the most interesting person in the room just by asking the right questions. Tell me about the worst job you ever took, she said, twirling linguine around her fork with practiced ease. Define worst. Most regrettable. It's the one that made you question your life choices. I thought about it while savoring what might have been the best marinara sauce I'd ever tasted. Last summer, this guy hired me to install a hot tub on his 3rd-floor balcony. Should have been a red flag right there, but he was offering double. My usual rate? Oh no, oh yes. Turns out he hadn't bothered to check if his balcony could support the weight. We got the thing halfway installed before his neighbor came over to inform us that his floor was buckling. Elena nearly choked on her wine. Please tell me nobody got hurt. Nobody got hurt, but it took a crew of 6 guys and a crane to get that hot tub down safely. The client tried to refuse to pay me because, and I quote, I didn't warn him about structural engineering requirements. Did you get paid? Eventually. After I pointed out that structural engineering wasn't part of the handyman job description, and maybe next time he should consult a professional before trying to turn his apartment into a spa. Some people, Elena said, shaking her head. What about you? What's the most challenging commission you've ever taken? She set down her fork and got that thoughtful expression I was learning meant she was choosing her words carefully. A woman hired me to paint a portrait of her late husband, but she wanted me to make him look the way he did when they first met, not the way he looked when he died. That sounds really sweet, actually. It was in theory. The problem was she couldn't decide which version of young him she wanted. She brought me 17 different photos spanning about 15 years. And every time I'd start working from one, she'd change her mind and want me to use a different one. 17 times? 17 times. I ended up painting 4 completely different portraits before she finally settled on one. But you know what? When she saw the final version, she cried for 20 minutes. Happy tears. She said it was exactly how she remembered him. There was something in the way Elena told the story that made me understand this wasn't just about difficult clients. This was about someone who understood loss, who had the patience to help another person work through grief in their own time and their own way. That's why you do the work you do, I said. What do you mean? You're not just painting pictures. You're helping people hold on to the things that matter to them. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. You get it? I get it. We spent the rest of dinner talking about everything and nothing her students, my strangest customer stories, our shared love of food truck tacos, and the fact that we'd both seen the same terrible action movie 3 times, because sometimes you need to watch things explode without having to think too hard about it. When we left the restaurant, Elena surprised me by suggesting we walk instead of driving straight home. Portland was doing that thing it does on perfect summer evenings, where the whole city seems to slow down and remember why people fall in love with living here. Street musicians played on corners, couples shared ice cream on benches, and the air smelled like food trucks and possibility. Can I ask you something? Elena said as we walked past a mural of a giant octopus wearing a top hat. Always. Are you doing this because you're genuinely interested, or because I'm some kind of novelty? The question stopped me in my tracks. What do you mean? I mean, have you ever dated someone significantly older before? No, I said honestly. Have you ever dated someone significantly younger? Also no, which is why I'm asking. We'd stopped walking and were facing each other on the sidewalk. In the evening light, Elena looked younger and older at the same time. Younger because she was smiling. Older because I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. Elena, if this was just about novelty, don't you think the novelty would have worn off by now? We've spent hours together. I've seen you get frustrated with cabinet doors, laugh until you snort, explain the finer points of pet portraiture with the seriousness of a museum curator. If I was here for the wrong reasons, I would have figured that out by now. What are the right reasons? The right reasons are that you make really good coffee, you're funnier than anyone has a right to be. You've got this way of looking at the world that makes everything seem more interesting. And when you laugh, I want to figure out how to make it happen again. She was quiet for a moment, processing this. Plus, I added, you're the first person I've met who doesn't seem to think emotional maturity is a character flaw. That got a smile. Low bar. But I appreciate the sentiment. It's not a low bar. It's actually a pretty high bar that most people my age seemed determined to limbo under. She laughed, and the tension I hadn't realized was there dissolved. Okay, I believe you. Good, because I was running out of ways to convince you that I'm here for the right reasons without resorting to interpretive dance. Please tell me you don't actually know how to do interpretive dance. I don't, but I would have learned if that's what it took. She reached for my hand as we started walking again, and I tried not to think too hard about how perfectly her fingers fit between mine. The universe has a sense of humor about timing. Just when I was starting to think that maybe Elena and I could navigate this whole age gap thing without too much outside interference, my best friend Jake decided to drop by my apartment unannounced on a Thursday evening. I was making dinner, attempting to recreate the pasta dish Elena had ordered at the Italian place, which was going about as well as you'd expect from someone whose usual cooking repertoire consists of sandwiches, cereal. When Jake walked in using the spare key I'd given him for emergencies. Emergency in Jake's vocabulary apparently included, I was in the neighborhood and wanted to see if you had beer. You could have called, I said, stirring what I hoped would eventually become a decent marinara sauce. I did call. Answer, he opened my fridge and helped himself to one of the craft beers Elena had brought over the previous weekend. Since when do you buy beer that costs more than $5? Since I developed taste buds. Jake examined the bottle like it contained suspicious evidence. This is fancy beer, Marcus. The kind of beer that people who have their lives together drink. The kind of beer that women who own real furniture buy. Should have changed the subject. Right then. Instead, I made the mistake of smiling. Jake pounced on that smile like Benny on a dropped sandwich. Oh my God, you're dating someone? I'm not dating someone. That's the most evasive non-answer I've ever heard. Which means you're definitely dating someone and you're being weird about it. He settled into one of my kitchen chairs, clearly prepared to stay until he extracted every detail. Who is she? How did you meet her? Why are you being secretive? Jake and I had been friends since college, which meant he had an annoying ability to read me like a book with large print. He was also the kind of person who found other people's romantic complications endlessly entertaining, probably because his own dating life was a series of 3-month relationships with women who were perfect except for various deal-breaking personality traits. Her name is Elena, I said, hoping that would be enough to satisfy his curiosity. It wasn't. Elena. Good name. Age. Does it matter? Marcus, you just asked me if age matters. That's either the most philosophical question you've ever posed, or you're dating someone significantly older or younger than you. Given that you're not typically attracted to college students, I'm going with older. Sometimes I wondered if Jake had missed his calling as a detective. She's older. How much older? I turned off the burner and faced him. 52. Jake blinked. Then he blinked again. Then he set down his beer very carefully, like he was worried sudden movements might cause the information to rearrange itself into something less surprising. 52, he repeated. Yes, as in 5'2", 5 and 2. 24 years older than you? Your math is correct, Marcus? Jake rubbed his face with both hands. How did you even meet a 52-year-old? Woman, do you frequent bingo halls now? Have you taken up bird watching? I fixed her cabinets. Of course you did. Started laughing, but not in a mean way. More like he was trying to process information that didn't quite fit into his understanding of the universe. Okay, I need details. What's she like? Is she? I don't know what do 52-year-old women even do. She's an artist. She teaches kids art classes and paints historical portraits of people's pets. That's actually kind of awesome. She is awesome. Jake studied my face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. You really like her? I really like her. And she likes you, seems to? He took a sip of his fancy beer, thinking. You know, people are going to have opinions about this, right? People have opinions about everything. Doesn't mean I have to care about them. Fair point. Seriously, what's the end game here? Are you thinking long-term, or is this just I don't know, what do you call it when you're dating someone completely outside your usual demographic? I call it dating someone I actually like. Jake held up his hands in surrender. Not judging, I'm just trying to understand. 24 years is a big gap, man. You guys are literally from different generations. So don't you want different things? It's like she's probably thinking about retirement planning while you're still figuring out what you want to be when you grow up. Jake, I'm 28. Not 18. I'm not exactly a child, I know that. She's lived a whole life already. Marriage, divorce, probably has decades of experience you don't have. Doesn't that feel, unbalanced? I turned back to my pasta sauce, which had somehow managed not to burn while we were talking, and considered his question. It wasn't the first time I'd thought about it, but hearing it out loud from someone else made it feel more real. What feels unbalanced? I said finally. Dating women my age who think having strong opinions about reality TV counts as having a personality. Elena knows who she is. She's figured out what matters to her. She doesn't play games or pretend to be someone she's not, just to seem more appealing. Okay, that's fair. And, yeah, she's got more life experience than me. That's not a bug, Jake. That's a feature. Jake was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he grinned. You know what? Good for you. She makes you happy, and you make her happy, then screw what anyone else thinks. Thank you. But I'm definitely going to need to meet her. Absolutely. Come on, I promise. I'll behave. Jake, your idea of behaving is not asking personal questions until the second time you meet someone. I'll be good. I'm genuinely curious about the woman who's managed to turn my commitment phobic ex-friend into someone who buys expensive beer and attempts to cook actual food. I looked at my pasta sauce, which had somehow transformed into something that actually resembled marinara. Maybe Elena's influence was already improving my life in ways I hadn't even noticed. We'll see, I said. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. But as Jake helped himself to another buyer and started telling me about his latest dating disaster, involving a woman who collected vintage mannequins, I found myself thinking that maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for my friends to meet Elena. After all, if this thing between us was going to work, It would have to survive contact with the real world eventually. The question was whether the real world was ready for us. Elena invited me to her place for dinner the following Friday, and this time, she wasn't just making sandwiches. When I arrived with Benny in tow, the smell of something incredible greeted us at the door. Garlic, herbs, and something else. I couldn't identify but wanted to experience immediately. "It smells amazing in here," I said, following her into the kitchen where she was stirring something in a large pot that looked like it had been simmering for hours. "Beef bourguignon," she said, tasting the sauce with a wooden spoon. "My grandmother's recipe, which means it takes forever and uses an entire bottle of wine, but it's worth it." She was wearing a black dress that was somehow both elegant and comfortable, her hair down in waves that caught the warm kitchen light. There was something different about her tonight, a kind of nervous energy that I hadn't seen before. "Can I help with anything? You can open that bottle of wine." She pointed to a bottle of red on the counter. "And tell me about your week. Did Jake recover from the shock of learning about my advanced age?" I laughed while wrestling with the corkscrew. "He wants to meet you, of course he does. Best friends always want to inspect the new girlfriend to make sure she's not secretly a serial killer or a Scientologist." "Girlfriend?" I paused in my wine opening to look at her. Elena stopped stirring and turned to face me, and I could see a slight blush creeping up her neck. "I mean, I don't know what we're calling this, but woman I'm casually seeing seems a bit awkward for dinner conversation." "Girlfriend works for me," I said, finally getting the cork out. "Though I should warn you, Jake's inspection process is pretty thorough. He once spent an entire evening asking my ex about her thoughts on pineapple pizza, just to see if she had strong enough opinions about controversial topics." What was her answer? She said she didn't care either way, which Jake interpreted as a red flag about her commitment to having principles. Elena laughed, accepting the glass of wine I handed her. Smart man, anyone who doesn't have strong feelings about pineapple pizza can't be trusted with important decisions. For the record, what's your stance? Firmly pro pineapple. Sweet and savory is a classic combination, and anyone who disagrees is a culinary coward. Jake's going to love you. We fell into our usual easy conversation while Elena finished preparing dinner. But there was an undercurrent of something different. Tonight, maybe it was the wine, or the candlelit dining room, or the fact that she'd made an effort that went beyond her usual casual elegance. But everything felt more intentional. The beef bourguignon was incredible, rich, and complex in a way that made me understand why some recipes are passed down through generations. Elena had also made fresh bread that was still warm from the oven, and she'd somehow managed to create a meal that felt both special and comfortable. "This is amazing," I said, and meant it. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My grandmother." "Mostly, she was French. Not from France, but her family was, and she took food very seriously. She used to say that cooking was love made visible. That's beautiful." She was beautiful. Died when I was 25, but she taught me that taking time to make something good was never time wasted. Elena paused, swirling wine in her glass. My ex-husband never understood that. He thought cooking was inefficient when you could just order takeout. It was the first time she'd mentioned her ex-husband without it being directly relevant to something else, and I sensed we were moving into deeper conversational territory. "How long were you married?" 15 years. "We got married when I was 25, divorced when I was 40. She took a sip of wine. "He was a good man, just we wanted different things. Or maybe we wanted the same things at different times. That must have been hard. The divorce was hard. The marriage, toward the end, was harder." She met my eyes across the table. "Spent years trying to be the person he wanted me to be, and he spent years trying to turn me into someone I wasn't. Neither of us was particularly successful. What did he want you to be?" Elena considered this. "More conventional, I think. He wanted dinner parties with his work colleagues, and a wife who cared about the right schools and the right neighborhoods. Someone who would give up the messy creative stuff and focus on being a proper corporate spouse." "And what did you want him to be?" "Someone who understood that I needed to paint, like I needed to breathe. Someone who could see that my art wasn't a hobby to be tolerated. It was part of who I am." I reached across the table and took her hand. "For what it's worth, I think he was an idiot." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. He wasn't an idiot. We just weren't right for each other. It took me a long time to understand that sometimes love isn't enough if you're fundamentally incompatible. Is that why you're hesitant about this? I gestured between us. About us? Elena was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing patterns on my hand. Partly I'm also hesitant because I'm 52 and you're 28 and I know how people will see us. But mostly, I'm hesitant because I really like you and I don't want to mess this up. How could you mess this up? By overthinking it. By letting my past make me too careful about the future. By being so afraid of getting hurt again that I sabotage something good before it has a chance to become something great. The honesty in her voice made something shift in my chest. This wasn't just casual dating anymore if it ever had been. This was to people admitting that what was happening between them mattered. Lena, I said, still holding her hand. I can't promise that this won't be complicated. Or that people won't have opinions. Or that we won't have to figure out some difficult stuff along the way. But I can promise that I'm not going anywhere just because things get hard. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her making some kind of decision. Okay, she said finally. Okay, let's stop being careful. Let's see what happens. When we just ... be ourselves and see where this goes. I'd like that. She squeezed my hand and smiled. And this time, there was no sadness in it at all. Good, because I made chocolate mousse for dessert. It would be a shame to waste it on someone I'm only casually seeing. Later, as we sat on her couch with Benny sprawled across our feet, sharing dessert and talking about everything and nothing, I realized that somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about age gaps or societal expectations or any of the complications we'd been worried about. This was just about two people who liked each other, trying to figure out how to build something real together, and for the first time since this whole thing started, that felt like enough. Our first real test as a couple came exactly 1 week later, in the form of Elena's sister Rachel showing up unannounced on a Saturday afternoon while I was helping Elena reorganize her art studio. I was up on a ladder, installing new shelving that would give her more storage space for canvases, when the doorbell rang. Elena had paint in her hair and was wearing an old shirt that had seen better decades. We'd been laughing about something ridiculous when the sound stopped our conversation cold. "I'm not expecting anyone," she said, frowning, through the front window. I could see a silver BMW in the driveway and a woman in what looked like expensive workout clothes standing on the porch, checking her phone with the impatience of someone who was used to immediate answers. "That's Rachel," Elena said, and there was something in her voice that made me pause in my shelf installation. "My sister." I opened the door, and I heard the conversation from the studio. "Elena, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop." "Bye, I brought coffee from that place you like." Rachel's voice was bright and cheerful, but there was an undertone that suggested this wasn't as spontaneous as she was making it sound. "That's sweet of you," Elena replied, and I could hear the caution in her tone. "Come in." I climbed down from the ladder and appeared in the living room just as Rachel was taking in the evidence of my presence, my toolbox by the front door. Benny sprawled in a patch of sunlight, and the general signs that Elena wasn't alone. Rachel was clearly Elena's sister, same bone structure, same expressive eyes, but where Elena had an artistic, slightly bohemian vibe, Rachel looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect everything, including a perfectly polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at me. Double quotes Rachel. "This is Marcus," Elena said. "Marcus, my sister Rachel. Nice to meet you," I said, wiping my hands on a shop rag before extending one for a handshake. Rachel's handshake was firm but brief, and I could feel her evaluating me in real time. "Marcus, the handyman." It wasn't a question, and the way she said handyman made it sound like a diagnosis rather than a profession. "That's me," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Lena's hired me to install some shelving. How ... practical." Rachel's smile got tighter. "Elena, could I speak with you for a moment?" "Privately?" Elena glanced at me, and I could see her weighing her options. "Actually, Marcus was just finishing up." "Weren't you, Marcus?" I took the hint. "Yeah, just need to put away my tools. I'll be out of your way in a few minutes." But as I packed up my equipment, I couldn't help overhearing the conversation that followed in the kitchen. Elena and Rachel weren't exactly whispering. "Elena, what are you doing?" Rachel's voice had lost all pretense of casual friendliness. "I'm having coffee with my sister and watching someone install shelves. Pretty standard Saturday afternoon. Don't be cute. You know what I mean? Mom told me you've been seeing someone younger." "Mom told you? How does Mom even know about Marcus?" "She saw you at the grocery store together last week. She said he looked like he could be your son." There was a pause, and I found myself holding my breath. "He's 28, Rachel. Not 18. 28.
Elena.
That's a 24-year age gap. That's not dating. I don't even know what that is. It's none of your business." "It is my business when my sister is making decisions that could affect her reputation, her career, her future. What are people going to think?" "I don't care what people think." "Well, you should. You teach children, Elena. What are their parents going to say when they find out their kid's art teacher is dating someone barely out of college? Marcus graduated from college 6 years ago and he runs his own business. He's not some irresponsible kid. That's not the point, and you know it. The point is how this looks. The point is that you're setting yourself up to be hurt when he realizes he wants someone his own age who can give him children and a normal relationship." I'd finished packing my tools, but I found myself frozen by the front door, listening to Rachel systematically voice every fear that had been lurking in the back of my mind since this whole thing started. What if he doesn't realize that? Elena's voice was quieter now, but I could hear the strain in it. "Then you're deluding yourself. Men his age don't want relationships with women our age unless there's something wrong with them or they have some kind of mommy complex." "Our age, Rachel? You're 45. "Exactly. I know what it's like to date younger men. It never works out, Elena. They always leave for someone more appropriate eventually." That was when I'd heard enough. I walked back into the kitchen, where both women turned to look at me with varying degrees of surprise and embarrassment. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, "but I couldn't help overhearing, and I think there's been a misunderstanding." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, see, I'm not dating Elena because there's something wrong with me, or because I have a mommy complex, or because I'm confused about what I want." I looked directly at Rachel, then at Elena. "I'm dating her because she's smart, funny, talented, and interesting. She makes me laugh. She challenges me to think about things differently, and she makes really excellent coffee." Rachel's expression didn't change. "And in 5 years, 10 years, she's 62 and you're 38. In 5 years, I hope, she's still making me laugh and I'm still fixing things around her house. In 10 years, I hope we're still having dinner together and arguing about whether pineapple belongs on pizza." "You're being naive." "Maybe, but I'd rather be naive and happy than cynical and alone." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Rachel looked like she was trying to decide whether to be offended or impressed. Elena was, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Finally, Rachel picked up her purse. "Elena, I hope you know what you're doing." "I do," Elena said quietly. After Rachel left, Elena and I stood in the kitchen, not quite looking at each other. "I'm sorry about that," she said finally. "Don't be. She's worried about you. That's what sisters do. She's also wrong. I hope so." Elena looked at me then, really looked at me. "Do you hope so? Or are you starting to think she might have a point?" I considered lying, giving her the easy answer. Instead, I told her the truth. I think she voiced some fears that were already in my head. But I also think that every relationship has uncertainty, regardless of age. The question isn't whether we'll face challenges. The question is whether we think what we have is worth working through them. "And do you think it's worth it?" "Yeah," I said. "I do. Do you?" She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen since Rachel arrived. "Yeah, I do too." After the Rachel incident, something shifted between Elena and me. It wasn't that we became more serious exactly, but we stopped pretending that what we were doing was casual. Started leaving toothbrushes at each other's places, and Benny began treating Elena's house like his second home, complete with his own food bowl and a favorite napping spot by her back door. The integration happened gradually, in small moments that felt both ordinary and significant. Like the Tuesday evening when Elena showed up at my apartment with groceries and announced she was making dinner because she was tired of watching me survive on sandwiches and whatever leftovers Jake occasionally brought over. Your kitchen is depressing, she said, examining my refrigerator contents with the expression of someone discovering a particularly disappointing archaeological dig. You have condiments, beer, and what I can only assume was once cheese. That cheese is still good. It's just aged. Marcus, this cheese has evolved beyond dairy into something approaching sentience. She threw away approximately half of my refrigerator's contents and somehow managed to create a meal out of what remained, supplemented by the supplies she'd brought. Watching her move around my tiny kitchen, turning chaos into dinner while humming something under her breath, I realized this was what domestic contentment looked like.
You know,
She said, stirring something that smelled incredible. Your neighbors are very curious about me. How do you know that? Mrs. Patterson from downstairs introduced herself to me in the hallway. Asked me if I was your mother. I nearly choked on my beer. She did not. She absolutely did. Then when I told her I wasn't, she got this look on her face like she was trying to solve a particularly complex math problem. What did you tell her? I told her I was your girlfriend, and that despite appearances, you were mature for your age. Elena grinned. She seemed skeptical about the maturity part. Mrs. Patterson has seen me try to assemble IKEA furniture. Skepticism is justified. Speaking of which, what is that thing in your living room that looks like it might have been a bookshelf in a previous life? That is a bookshelf? It's just creatively interpreted? Elena finished cooking, and we ate dinner sitting on my couch, plates balanced on our knees, watching a documentary about art forgers that Elena had insisted would be educational. Benny positioned himself strategically between us, hoping for dropped food and providing commentary in the form of dramatic sighs when none appeared. I like this, Elena said during a particularly boring segment about authentication techniques. The documentary? Because I have to say it's not exactly riveting. No, this. Sitting around, eating dinner, watching terrible educational programming. It's nice to do ordinary things with someone. Is that not something you did with your ex-husband? Lena was quiet for a moment, considering. We did ordinary things, but they always felt like performances. Like we were playing house instead of actually living together. Everything had to be perfect. The right dishes, the right wine, the right everything. This feels more real. Though we're eating off mismatched plates and my bookshelf is held together with hope and duct tape, especially because of that. The following Saturday, Elena invited me to come with her to the farmer's market, something she did every weekend. To buy supplies for her weekly cooking experiments. I'd never been to a farmer's market before, my usual grocery. Shopping consisted of quick trips to whatever store was closest when I realized I was out of essentials, but Elena approached it like an art form. She knew half the vendors by name, had opinions about seasonal vegetables I'd never heard of, and somehow managed to turn grocery shopping into an entertaining social experience. We left with bags full of produce that looked more like still-life subjects than food, plus a loaf of bread from a baker who'd apparently been trying to convince Elena to let him paint her portrait for months. Henry's been asking me to model for him since I started coming here, she explained as we walked back to her car. He's convinced that I have interesting bone structure, which I think is artist code for you look like you have stories to tell, do you? Have stories to tell? More than I probably should. What about you? Any interesting stories from your pre-handyman days? Define interesting? Surprising? It's the kind of thing that would make someone think they don't know you as well as they thought? They did. I thought about it while we loaded groceries into her car. I was a philosophy major in college. Elena paused in her bag arranging. Really. Spent 4 years thinking deep thoughts about the nature of existence and whether free will is an illusion. Wrote my senior thesis on the ethics of artificial intelligence. What happened? Graduated. Looked at the job market for philosophy. Majors didn't realize that deep thoughts don't pay rent. So I went into construction, which led to handyman work, which led to meeting you in your kitchen with your homicidal cabinet doors. Do you ever miss it? The philosophy? Sometimes. You know what I've learned from fixing people's houses? What? Most philosophical problems are a lot like plumbing problems. They seem incredibly complex and mysterious until you figure out what's actually broken. And then the solution is usually simpler than you thought. Elena laughed. That might be the most practical application of philosophy I've ever heard. My professors would probably disagree. Your professors probably never had to figure out why they're garbage disposal. was making demonic noises at 3 in the morning. That afternoon, we cooked together using Elena's farmer's market haul. She taught me how to properly dice an onion without crying, how to tell when garlic was perfectly browned, and how to taste food as you cook it instead of just hoping for the best. I taught her how to use a power drill without accidentally putting holes in things that weren't supposed to have holes. "This is weirdly domestic," she said, watching me repair a wobbly table leg while she prepared vegetables. "Good domestic or weird domestic?" "Good domestic. Like we're a team that actually works together instead of two people who happen to live in the same space." "Is that what it was like with your ex?" "We were more like roommates who occasionally had dinner together. Parallel lives instead of connected ones." As the afternoon wore on, I realized that Elena was right. This did feel domestic, but in the best possible way. We were building something together, one small, ordinary moment at a time. And for the first time in my life, the idea of domestic life didn't feel boring or restrictive. It felt like home. The conversation that changed everything happened on a rainy Thursday evening in October. Elena had been quieter than usual all week, and I'd been trying to give her space while also wondering if I'd done something wrong. We were sitting in her living room, me reading a book about sustainable building practices and her supposedly working on a sketch, but really just staring at the blank page. "Marcus," she said suddenly, setting down her pencil. "What? Can I tell you something?" The tone of her voice made me close my book and give her my full attention. Of course. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her working up to whatever she needed to say. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. "I had a miscarriage when I was 34. The words hung in the air between us. I didn't say anything, sensing that she had more to tell me, and that what she needed most was for someone to listen. David and I had been trying to have children for 2 years. When I finally got pregnant, we were ... We were so happy. We started planning the nursery, picking out names, talking about what kind of parents we wanted to be. She picked up her pencil again, turning it over in her hands. "I lost the baby at 12 weeks. Elena, I'm so sorry. We tried again for another 3 years. 2 more miscarriages. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with me, which somehow made it worse. If there had been a reason, something to fix or treat, maybe I could have handled it better." I moved closer to her on the couch, and she leaned into me slightly. "David wanted to keep trying. Adoption, fertility treatments, whatever. It took, but I couldn't. Every month that passed without getting pregnant felt like a failure. Every pregnancy announcement from friends felt like a reminder of what I couldn't do. I started to hate my own body. What did you do? I threw myself into my art. I started taking on more commissions, longer hours in the studio. David said I was running away from the problem, and maybe he was right. But I needed to find something I was good at, something I could control." Elena set the pencil down and turned to face me fully. "The thing is, I never really grieved properly. Not for the babies we lost, and not for the future I'd imagined. I just ... moved on. I told myself it wasn't meant to be, that some people aren't meant to be parents, that I had other things to focus on. But you didn't really believe that. No, I didn't. And it destroyed my marriage, slowly but completely. David needed me to want children as much as he did, and I needed him to want me, even if we never had children. Neither of us could give the other what they needed. I took her hand, and she squeezed mine tightly. The divorce was almost a relief. I could stop pretending that I was okay with trying again, and he could find someone who could give him the family he wanted. Did he find someone? Yes. He remarried 2 years ago. They have a little girl now. Elena's smile was sad but genuine. "I'm happy for him, really. He's a good man who deserved to get what he wanted. And what about what you wanted?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I convinced myself that what I wanted was independence. Freedom. No more schedules and doctors and disappointing people. It's just me and my art and the life I could build on my own terms." That sounds lonely, it was, but lonely felt safer than hopeful. I understood then why Elena had been so cautious about us, why she'd seemed surprised by her own feelings, why the age gap had felt like such a significant obstacle to her. "Elena," I said carefully, "do you still want children?" "How?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her considering whether to give me the easy answer or the honest one. I don't know, she said finally. For so long I've told myself that chapter of my life is closed, that I'm too old now anyway, that I've moved past wanting those things. But lately, being with you, I've started wondering if maybe I just convinced myself I didn't want them because wanting them hurt too much. And now? Now I'm 52 years old, in love with a 20-year-old man, and I have no idea what I want except to not lose what we have. The word love hung between us. It was the first time either of us had said it out loud, and it felt both thrilling and terrifying. You're in love with me? I asked. Elena blushed. I didn't mean to say that. I mean, I did mean it. I just didn't mean to say it like that. Good, I said, because I'm in love with you too. We sat there for a moment, both of us processing this new development. Marcus, Elena said, I need you to know that if you want children someday, I can't promise you that's something I can give you. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe it is. But I can't go through that hope and disappointment again. I thought about this seriously. It wasn't something I'd given a lot of consideration to before meeting Elena. Kids had always been a vague someday concept. It's not an immediate desire. Can I tell you something? I said. I've never particularly wanted children. Not because I don't like kids, but because I've never met anyone who made me want to build that kind of future together. And now? Now I know that what I want is a life with you. If that includes children, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. What I don't want is to lose you, because we're both too afraid to find out what we could have together. Elena started crying then, but they were good tears. Relief tears. How did you get so wise for someone so young? She asked. I think you're confusing wisdom with stubbornness. I'm just too stubborn to let a good thing go without a fight. She laughed through her tears and kissed me, and I realized that this conversation hadn't made things more complicated between us. It had made them more real. We spent the rest of the evening talking about our fears, our hopes, and the strange way that loving someone could make you brave enough to want things you thought were impossible. And for the first time since I'd met Elena, the future felt not like something to worry about, but something to look forward to. Jake's birthday party became our unofficial public debut. Honestly, it couldn't have gone better if we'd scripted it ourselves. He'd been planning this thing for weeks, a backyard barbecue with all his friends, co-workers, and what he generously called his extended social network, which really meant anyone he'd ever had a decent conversation with at a coffee shop. You sure you're ready for this? Elena asked as we pulled up to Jake's house. Through the windows, we could see the party already in full swing, people laughing, music playing, the general chaos of 30 people trying to have conversations. Over a playlist that Jake had probably spent hours perfecting. Are you ready for this? I countered. Fair warning, Jake's friends can be intense. How intense are we talking? Remember how you said you liked people who ask real questions instead of making small talk? These people consider what's your greatest fear, an appropriate icebreaker. Elena laughed. I'm going to fit right in. She did. Within 20 minutes of arriving, Elena was deep in conversation with Jake's friend Sarah about the ethics of restoring old paintings, while simultaneously helping Jake's neighbor fix a wobbly patio chair that had been driving him crazy all summer. I watched her move through the party like she'd been part of this group for years, and I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't even realized was tense. She's perfect for you, Jake said, appearing at my elbow with 2 beers and a satisfied expression. I wasn't sure at first, the whole age thing seemed weird, but watching you two together, it makes sense. What do you mean? You're different with her? More, I don't know, settled. Like you're not trying to be anyone except exactly who you are. Before I could respond, Jake's coworker Mike wandered over, clearly having overheard enough of our conversation to be curious. So Elena's the older woman we've been hearing about? Mike asked, with the subtle grace of a freight train. How much? Older are we talking? I felt my jaw tighten, but Elena appeared at my side before I could respond. 24 years, she said cheerfully, handing Mike the beer she'd apparently retrieved for him, which means I was already drinking legally when Marcus was learning to tie his shoes. Shocking, I know. Mike blinked, clearly not having expected such a direct response. Doesn't that make things complicated? He asked. Not as complicated as you'd think, Elena said. Turns out compatibility has more to do with shared values and mutual respect than birth year? Who knew? Sarah laughed from Across the patio, Lena, I like you. Mike, stop being weird about age gaps and go help Jake with the grill before he burns the burgers. The rest of the evening set a pattern. People would approach with curiosity about our relationship. Elena would respond with humor and honesty. And within minutes, she'd have them talking about something completely different. She seemed genuinely interested in everyone she met, asked thoughtful questions, and had opinions about everything from urban planning to the best way to cook salmon. Your girlfriend is awesome, Jake's friend Tom told me while we were both getting drinks. She just spent 20 minutes explaining why public art matters to my teenage daughter. And now Emma wants to take an art class. Do you know how hard it is to get a 16-year-old interested in anything that doesn't involve TikTok? At the end of the night, Elena had been invited to 3 different social events, exchanged numbers with half the women at the party, and had somehow convinced Jake's notoriously antisocial roommate to show her his photography portfolio. So I said as we drove home, that went well. Your friends are good people. A little nosy, but good people. Were you nervous? Elena considered this. A little. I wasn't sure how they'd react to me. But they love you and they want you to be happy. It makes it easy to like them. Even Mike, with his incredibly subtle, questioning technique, especially Mike, he was just protecting you in his own awkward way. It's sweet. I reached over and took her hand. Thank you for what? For being yourself. For not pretending to be younger or different or whatever you thought they wanted to see. For just being Elena. She squeezed my hand. That's all I know how to be. As we pulled into her driveway, I realized that the evening had been more than just successful social integration. It had been proof that what Elena and I had was real enough and strong enough to withstand public scrutiny. We weren't just a private relationship anymore. We were a couple that existed in the world, friends who accepted us, and a future that felt possible. And for the first time since this whole thing started, it didn't feel scary at all. The first crack in our perfect bubble appeared on a Tuesday morning in November. I was at Elena's place, making coffee while she finished up a painting commission, when her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and her face went pale. It's my doctor's office, she said, and I could hear the immediate anxiety in her voice. She stepped into the other room to take the call, and I tried not to listen, but the house was small and her voice carried. The conversation was brief, professional, and when she hung up, she was quiet for a long time. Everything okay? I asked when she came back to the kitchen. Annual physical results, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Everything's fine, just reminders that I'm not getting any younger. She tried to laugh it off, but something had shifted. Over the next few days, Elena became distant in small ways that added up to something bigger. She canceled our dinner. Plans twice, claimed she was too busy with work to see me over the weekend. And when we did talk, she seemed distracted. I gave her space, figuring she'd tell me what was wrong when she was ready. But the space grew longer, and the silence grew, heavier, until finally, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Elena, I said, showing up at her door on Thursday evening with takeout from the Thai place she loved, we need to talk. She let me in, but there was a hesitancy in her movements, like she was already preparing to pull away. What's going on? I asked as we sat on her couch, the food getting cold between us. And don't say nothing, because you've been acting weird all week. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. My doctor mentioned that if I wanted to have children, I should think about it sooner rather than later. She said, while it's not impossible at 52, every year that passes makes it more complicated, more risky. Okay, I said carefully. How does that make you feel? Terrified, she said immediately. For a minute, sitting in that office, I actually considered it. I thought about what it would be like to have your baby, to give you something that most women your age could give you easily. Elena. No, let me finish. She turned to face me fully. Then I came home and really thought about it. Marcus, I would be 70 when our child graduated high school. 70, you'd be in your 40s. Dealing with a teenager and a geriatric girlfriend, you're not geriatric. I would be, relatively speaking. What about when our kid is 30 and I'm 82? What kind of grandmother could I be? What kind of life is that for a child? I could see where this was going, and I didn't like it. So, what are you saying? Elena took a shaky breath. I'm saying maybe Rachel was right. Maybe I'm being selfish, keeping you from someone who could give you a normal life, a normal family, normal timing for everything. Stop, I said, more sharply than I intended. Just stop. You're doing it again? Doing what? It's making decisions? For both of us. Deciding what I want, what I need, what's good for me, without actually asking me. I'm trying to be realistic, no. You're trying to protect yourself from getting hurt by hurting yourself first. I moved closer to her on the couch. Elena, look at me. Do you want children with me? She met my eyes, and I could see the conflict. There, I don't know, maybe. Sometimes I think about it and it seems wonderful. Sometimes I think about it and it seems impossible. That's not an answer to my question. Do you want children with me? Yes, she whispered. Sometimes I do. Wanting something doesn't make it right. And do you think I want children with you? I think you should want children with someone who can give them to you without it being a medical miracle and a social experiment. I stood up, frustrated. You're doing it again? Stop telling me what I should want and ask me what I actually want. Fine, she said, standing too. What do you want, Marcus? I want you to stop trying to push me away every time something gets complicated. I want you to trust that I'm adult enough to know my own mind. I want you to stop acting like loving you is some kind of mistake I'm going to regret. Tears started falling down her cheeks. But what if it is? What if 5 years from now you realize you missed out on having a family because you were with me? Then that's my choice to make, and my regret to live with. But Elena, you don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide that I'm better off without you. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm scared, Marcus. I'm scared of wanting something I can't have. I'm scared of taking something away from you that you don't even know you want yet. I sat back down and pulled her down next to me. I know. But being scared isn't a good enough reason to give up on us, isn't it? No, it's a good reason to be careful, to talk things through, to make sure we're both making choices we can live with. But it's not a reason to quit. She leaned against me, and I could feel some of the tension leave her body. So what do we do? She asked. We figure it out, together, like we've been doing with everything else. The opportunity came at the worst possible time. A construction company in Seattle called me in December with an offer I'd never expected. A management position overseeing restoration projects for historic buildings. It was exactly the kind of work I'd dreamed about. Combining my construction background with my philosophy degree in ways I'd never thought possible. The pay was almost double what I was making in Portland, and they wanted an answer by New Year's. I didn't tell Elena about it right away. We were still navigating the fragile territory after our fight about children, and I knew this would complicate things in ways neither of us was ready for. But the deadline was approaching, and I couldn't keep it from her anymore. Seattle, Elena said when I finally brought it up over dinner at her place. You were eating the lasagna she'd made from her grandmother's recipe, and until that moment, it had been a perfect evening. It's a great opportunity, I said, watching her face carefully. Historic preservation, working with architects and city planners, really meaningful projects. That's wonderful, she said, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. When would? You start February 1st. If I take it. If you take it. She set down her fork. Marcus, this sounds like everything you've ever wanted professionally. It's a good opportunity, I said again. Don't do that. Don't minimize it because you're worried about my feelings. This is huge. I reached across the table and took her hand. It's also in Seattle, 3 hours away. So? Elena, that's not exactly commuting distance. This would mean leaving Portland, leaving you, starting over somewhere else. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her thinking, or it could mean I come with you? The suggestion hung in the air between us. I'd been hoping she might say that, but I'd been afraid to ask. Would you really? Elena considered this seriously. I could teach art anywhere, paint anywhere. Portland is wonderful, but it's not like I'm tied here by family or a career I can't relocate. What about your house? Your students? Your whole life here? My life is wherever you are, she said simply. The rest is just logistics. But logistics, as it turned out, were more complicated than either of us had anticipated. Elena's house had been her sanctuary after her divorce, the first place that had ever been entirely hers. Selling it felt like giving up more than just property. And her art students, she'd been teaching some of them for years. Watching them grow from kids who thought art was just copying pictures to young artists with their own voices. Maybe we could try long distance for a while, I suggested one evening as we sat, surrounded by real estate listings and job postings. See how it goes. Long-distance relationships are hard under the best circumstances, Elena said. Add in our age gap and the fact that we've only been together for 6 months and the odds aren't great. So what are you saying? Saying that maybe this is a sign? Maybe the universe is telling us that this thing between us, as wonderful as it's been, isn't meant to be permanent. There it was again, Elena trying to make the hard decision for both of us. Trying to protect herself from potential heartbreak by creating definite heartbreak. The universe isn't telling us anything, I said. This is just life being complicated, like life always is. The question isn't whether we'll face challenges. The question is whether we want to face them together or separately. Marcus, be realistic. You're 28. This job could be the start of an incredible career. You shouldn't turn it down for a relationship that might not even work out. And you shouldn't assume it won't work out just because it's complicated. We argued about it for days. Elena insisted I should take the job and that we should end things cleanly rather than try to maintain something across distance and time zones. I insisted that the job wouldn't mean anything if I had to give up the person who'd made me want to build a life worth having in the first place. Finally, Jake intervened. You're both being idiots, he announced, showing up at my apartment with beer and unsolicited advice. Elena thinks she's being noble by pushing you away, and you think you're being romantic by refusing to even consider the job. You're both wrong. Thanks for the pep talk. I'm serious. Marcus, if you turn down this job and then things don't work out with Elena, you'll resent her for it. And Elena, if you push him away to protect him, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. So what do you suggest? I suggest you both stop being so damn scared of the future and start figuring out how to build one together. Take the job. Elena moves to Seattle. You see what happens? Worst case scenario, it doesn't work out, and you both learn something about what you want. Best case scenario, you build the life you're both too afraid to admit you want. Later that night, I found Elena in her studio working on a painting of Benny asleep in a patch of sunlight. It was beautiful, peaceful, and warm, and full of the kind of contentment I'd been feeling more and more lately. Jake thinks we're both idiots, I said. Jake's probably right, she replied without looking up from her canvas.
Elena,
I want to take the job, and I want you to come with me.
She set down her brush and turned to face me. Are you sure? Sure. I want to find out what happens when we stop being afraid of our own happiness. She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her in weeks. Okay, she said. Let's go to Seattle. Elena's going away party was supposed to be a small gathering, just a few of her close friends, some of her art students and their parents, and me. What we hadn't counted on was her ex-husband David showing up. We were in the community center where Elena taught her classes, surrounded by her students' artwork and the warm chaos of people who genuinely cared about her. Elena was in her element, moving between conversations, accepting hugs from kids who were devastated to lose their favorite teacher, and graciously deflecting questions about our scandalous relationship. I was helping carry food from the kitchen when I saw him. David was standing near the entrance, scanning the room with the careful expression of someone who wasn't sure he should be there. He was exactly what I'd expected, tall, well-dressed. The kind of man who looked like he'd never had a day of uncertainty in his life. Elena saw him at the same time I did, and I watched her face go through a series of emotions before settling on polite surprise. "David," she said, walking over to him. "I didn't expect to see you here. I heard through the grapevine that you were leaving Portland. Thought I should say goodbye?" Their conversation was awkward but civil, the kind of careful politeness that comes from people who used to love each other and are trying to remember how to be strangers. I stayed back, letting Elena handle the situation until David's eyes found me across the room. "So you must be Marcus," he said when Elena reluctantly brought him over for introductions. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine but measured. "Elena's told me about you, has she? We still talk occasionally." co-owners of a storage unit neither of us wants to deal with. David glanced around the room, taking in the artwork, the kids, the obvious affection everyone had for Elena. This is quite a send-off. Elena's pretty special, I said. She is. David looked at me more carefully. I wasn't sure what to think when I heard about this. The age difference, the speed of everything. But seeing you two together, seeing how happy she looks, I'm glad she found someone who appreciates what an amazing woman she is, even though I'm younger than her divorce decree. David laughed, and for the first time I could see why Elena had married him, especially because of that. Elena spent our entire marriage trying to be older than she was, more serious, more conventional. She's always been young at heart. Maybe she just needed someone who could see that. Before I could respond, one of Elena's students, a precocious 10-year-old named Sophie, appeared at Elena's elbow with a wrapped gift. "Ms. Elena, this is for you and Mr. Marcus," Sophie announced loudly enough for half the room to hear. "It's a painting of you two, but I made you look like superheroes because you're brave enough to love each other, even though people say weird things about it." Elena unwrapped the gift to reveal a charming, completely recognizable portrait of us as cartoon superheroes. I was wearing a cape and holding a hammer. Elena had a palette for a shield and paintbrushes for weapons. At the bottom, in Sophie's careful handwriting, it said, "Love Heroes." "Sophie, this is beautiful," Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. "Mom says love is love, and people who judge other people for being happy are just jealous they don't. Have what you have." The room had gone quiet, and I realized that everyone was watching us, waiting to see how we'd respond to this very public declaration from a child who didn't understand that our relationship was supposed to be complicated. Elena looked at me, then at the room full of people who'd become our community, then back at Sophie. "Your mom is absolutely right," Elena said clearly. "Thank you for making us look so heroic. I've never been a superhero before. You're welcome. Also, Mr. Marcus, will you still fix things in Seattle?" "I will definitely still fix things." "In Seattle? Good. Miss Elena needs someone to fix things because she's really bad at using tools." The laughter that followed broke the tension, and the party resumed its warm, chaotic energy. But later, as we were cleaning up, David approached me one more time. "Take care of her," he said simply. "She deserves to be happy." "I plan to," I replied. "Good. And Marcus, don't let anyone make you feel like what you have isn't real, just because it doesn't look like what they expected. I made that mistake once. Don't repeat it." As David left, Elena slipped her hand into mine. "Ready to be love heroes?" she asked. "With you? Absolutely." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.